After studying this module, you shall be able to know some popular non-parametric methods to analyze relationships. Learn the rank order correlation coefficients, Spearmans rho and Kendalls tau. Know about some of the other correlational methods like tetrachoric and phi coefficients. Evaluate the values of non-parametric correlation coefficients. Analyze the significance of the calculated values of correlation coefficients, etc. Introduction. Non-parametric methods of correlation. It is always of interest to a researcher to find out the degree of association between variables of interest. The usual method of correlation is the Pearson's product moment correlation, but that requires the data to fulfill the assumptions of parametric statistics. We always have data with continuous variables or underlying continuity is assumed along a numerical scale. There are non-parametric methods of correlation that are suitable for data that may not be apt for data otherwise. These non-parametric methods of correlation are used when the data is in ordinal or nominal scale of measurement or in descriptive categories only. No assumptions about the population from which the samples are drawn are made, or if any assumptions are there, they are very few. The non-parametric correlation methods are easier to calculate and apply to the data. Let us explain this by taking an example. It is hypothesized that a person's ability to be a leader is related to his success in sports events played in school. The leadership ability was measured using a scale, while the rank held during the sports events played in the school was taken from the records maintained in school and is an ordinal scale. The Pearson's product moment correlation is applicable to data in interval or ratio scale, so ideally is not suitable here. Thus, the non-parametric correlation coefficients have to be applied. Some of the most popularly used non-parametric correlation methods are Spearmans rho, Kendalls tau and phi coefficient. The current module discusses these methods and also mentions a few others which are relatively less prevalent in research. Spearman's rank order correlation rho. The concept of Spearman's rank order correlation. The Spearman's rank order correlation is a non-parametric correlation coefficient that is applicable to data which does not conform to the parametric norms. The variables such as truthfulness, sporting spirit, marketing ability, etc. are complex variables and thus difficult to measure. Assigning quantities to them is not possible. However, ranking them is easier and therefore statistical procedures have been devised to analyze such data. To analyze relationship among such variables, methods are available and one such method is Spearman's rank order correlation. The correlation coefficient is known as rho and is symbolized as rho. The basic logic behind rank order correlation was developed by Charles Spearman. The logic is that the variables being measured are at least in ordinal scale. The data has to be thus ranked in two ordered series. Once the data has been ranked, in the differences between the rank obtained by each individual on both the variables is calculated. The disparity between the ranks for each individual is indicative of association that might be there between the two variables. As obvious, if there would be a high difference between the ranks, then it would directly mean a lower association between the variables. If the difference between the ranks is closer to 0, it would point at a near perfect association between the variables. Once the ranks are calculated, for the obtained data, the Pearson's correlation equation is applied to it. Charles Spearman, 1863 to 1945, developed a method to calculate correlation of qualitative variables and named it as Spearman's rank order correlation coefficient. The equation given gives the value of rho. Rho is equal to 1 minus 6 sigma d square upon n into n square minus 1, where d is the difference in the ranks between the two variables, n is the sample size. This equation is numbered as 1. This formula needs correction when the ranks are tied, that is, two or more individuals have the same score on the same variables. As we shall take up such example in the coming section, it will be more clear to the readers. However, if the number of tied ranks is not many, one may still use the formula in equation 1. Otherwise, it is advisable to use the formula given below in equation 2, which says rho is equal to n cube minus n minus 6 sigma d square minus Tx plus Ty divided by 2, the whole divided by square root of n cube minus n whole square minus Tx plus Ty into n cube minus n plus Tx Ty, where d is the difference between the ranks, t is the correction factor for tied ranks and calculated as t is equal to sigma t cube minus t. T is the number of all the tied ranks in a group for a particular variable. N is the sample size. Numerical application of Spearman rank order correlation. The first example is for the untied ranks, that is the simplest form where no observations have a tied rank. The data given below in table 1 gives the rating given by two political party leaders about the 6 personal qualities they feel are important to win an election. The political leaders' ratings are subjected to rank order correlation to know about the degree of association among their responses. The column 1 talks about the qualities, leader A and leader B ranks them, and the next columns are about the differences in ranks and the squared differences. Using the formula given in equation 1, one can calculate the value of rho by following the given steps. The first 3 columns of the table give the 6 qualities and the ranks given by the leaders. Fourth column gives the difference between the ranks as d for each quality, and we calculate the d square. Rho is equal to 1 minus 6 into 32 divided by 6 multiplied with 6 square minus 1 in brackets. So, after substitution of the values, we find the rho for the data in table 1 turns out to be 0.086. Let us take another example, but this time slightly more complex, that is, it explores the situations where the ranks are tied. A study was taken up to see if there is really a significant relationship between creativity and how quickly one completes the plot of a short story. The creativity scores were obtained using a standardized test, while time taken to complete the story was recorded in seconds. The sample comprised of 15 artists from the art school. The rank order correlation was calculated to understand the relationship between the two variables. The obtained data is given in table 2 below. Table 2 shows the data in table which shows the scores obtained by the subjects on creativity and time taken to give an end to a story. The individual explored are given in column 1. Column 2 is about the creativity score, column 3 about the time taken, and then the rankings and differences are given in subsequent columns. As the variables x and y are continuous in nature, both have to be ranked as shown in the table. The variable x has been ranked with the highest score 203 being given the rank 1. The next highest 197 given the rank 2. Now take a note here, the observation 176 is repeated twice and therefore the rank 8 plus 9, which should have been ideally assigned to the 2, we give a mean of the rank 8 and 9, that is 8.5, to both the scores of 176. So, the scores of 176 which occur twice are given the joint rank of 8.5 instead of 8 and 9. The variable y is scored in seconds, and thus the two smallest scores 94 are actually the highest and ranked 1.5 each, using the same logic of tied ranks. The data has relatively high number of tied ranks in the variable y. The rank order correlation should be calculated using equation 2 here that takes care of the tied ranks. So, we calculate the value of Tx is equal to 3q minus 3 plus 2q minus 2, which turns out to be 30, and Ty is calculated to be 18 using the same formula. So, the rho is worked out using equation 2 here, which is 15q minus 15 minus 6 into 703.5 minus 30 plus 18 divided by 2, and the whole divided by square root of 15q minus 15 whole square minus 30 plus 18 into 15q minus 15 plus 30 into 18, which turns out to be 0.367. Significance of rho. The Spearman rank order correlation value can be tested for significance with the null hypothesis that the two variables under study are not associated in the population. The alternative hypothesis can be there that there is an association between the two variables. So, this means it is a two-tailed alternative hypothesis, and there is a positive or there is a negative correlation. We can go for a one-tailed alternative hypothesis. The degree of freedom is n minus 2. The table of critical values of rho lets us compare the calculated value with the desired alpha values. If the calculated values exceed or equal the critical value, then the calculated value turns out to be significant. When the sample size is large, that is, n is greater than 50, the correlation values may be converted to z by using the formula z is equal to rho into square root of n minus 1. The z value may then be used to determine the significance. Calculated value of z is greater than or equal to z critical, reject the null hypothesis in favor of the alternative hypothesis. Kendall's rank order correlation coefficient tau. The concept of Kendall's rank order correlation. Kendall's tau is another non-parametric correlational measure which is suitable to a similar set of data that is used for Spearman's rank order correlation coefficient. The method is named after Maurice Kendall, who developed it in 1938. A similar measure was also proposed by Fechner in context of time series. So, if the variables are in at least ordinal scale and rank can be assigned to the scores on variables being measured, then Kendall's tau is an apt estimate of association. One observation is that Kendall's tau is ideally preferred when the sample size is small and there are many tied ranks. It means that a number of scores share the same rank. It has been seen that Spearman's rank order correlation is a more popular measure of correlation, but statisticians suggest that Kendall's tau is a better estimate of correlation. One major advantage that Kendall's tau enjoys over Spearman's rho is that it can be used for calculation of partial correlations too. So, if there are more than two variables, then the possible effects of one variable can be partialed out while assessing the relationship between any two of them. The rationale behind Kendall's tau is understanding the number of scores that are out of order in ranks among the two variables to each individual. If the order of ranks matches perfectly and no ranks are out of order, then Kendall's tau turns out to be 1, that is perfect correlation. Suppose all the ranks are out of order, then tau turns out to be -1. So, in other words, Kendall's tau is a coefficient of disarray, if one may say so. There are various methods that may be adopted by statisticians to arrive at the tau coefficient. Some are easier but may not be used in case of tied ranks. The method discussed below is useful across cases and situations. Tau is equal to 2 into S plus minus S minus the whole divided by n into n minus 1. This is equation 3 that gives us the value of tau whenever numerical substitution is made. In this equation, S is the sum of ranks and n is the sample size. For tied ranks, the Kendall's tau needs to be corrected for variance, and therefore the above formula in equation 3 undergoes modification and is written with slight changes as given in equation 4. Tau is equal to 2 into S plus minus S minus whole divided by square root of n into n minus 1 minus Tx into square root of n into n minus 1 minus Ty. This is equation 4 that gives us the changed value of tau whenever tied ranks are there. In this equation, T is the correction factor for tied ranks and is calculated as T is equal to sigma T into T minus 1, where T is the number of all the tied ranks in a group of a particular variable. Numerical applications of Kendall's rank order correlation coefficient tau. We will explore it with two different equations as discussed, first with untied ranks and next with tied ranks. Untied ranks. A researcher wishes to investigate the relationship between length of time a student has been smoking and the degree to which he believes that it will be cancerous for them. So, 11 smokers were chosen in college campus and were asked for the duration for which they had been smoking. They were also asked to rate their chances of getting cancer on a 5-point scale ranging from not possible, which was coded as 1, to definitely, which was coded as 5. The data thus gathered is given in table which gives the scores obtained by 11 students on smoking duration, and the belief that it would be cancerous to them. The rankings are also shown in brackets along with the scores for both the variables x and y. Let us cast the given data into a table that has the values on variable x in numerical order arranged in the first column of table 4 and variable y also in the numerical order arranged in the first row of table 4. Find the frequency of each cell of the table by arranging each pair of scores from the data in this table according to the appropriate cell combination. Like the first pair of scores for student 1 will find its place in the first cell of the table. The frequencies are shown in red color in the table. The table 4 gives the analysis table for the data from table 3 for Kendalls tau, ratings for being cancerous and years of smoking for the subjects are shown. Now for each cell, add all the entries present below and to the right of the cell, subsequently multiplying it with the entry in the particular cell. As shown in table 4, the entry in the first cell is 1 and the cell below and to its right are shown in blue. Add all the entries and multiply the sum with 1. So, what do we arrive at? 1 into sum of all the entries described turns out to be 8. Repeat this for all the cells. The process helps us in getting the value of S positive or S plus. All the entries that are contributing to positive relationship in order. So, we have S plus to be 37. Similarly, find the S by counting the number of entries that are below and to the left of the cell and multiplying it with the frequency of the current target cell. And we arrive at the value of S minus, which turns out to be S minus equal to 3 plus 2 plus 1 equal to 6. The value of tau can now be found using the equation 3 as discussed in the previous section. So, tau turns out to be 0.56 after substitution of the values from the tables. Let us take up another example of the tied ranks. The Kendalls tau needs to be corrected for ties by making the adjustments in tied ranks just like Spearmans rank order correlation. Let us once again take the data in table 3. Adjustments are made for the tied ranks for variable x and y as Tx is equal to 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 equal to 10 and Ty equal to 2 plus 2 plus 6 plus 6 equal to 16. Now we use equation 4 for the correlation coefficient of tau and we arrive at a value of 0.64 upon substitution of the values in the equation. So, one finds that with the same set of data, the Kendalls tau has changed with the correction for tied ranks. The change is from 0.56 to 0.64 for untied and tied tau formula respectively. One would see a substantial change with an increase in the number of tied ranks in the data. If the data has large proportion of tied ranks or number of ties is high, then the effect of correction is high. Significance of Kendalls tau. The statistic tau can be tested for significance for the null hypothesis that the variables being correlated are independent in the population. For a sample size less than 30, the critical tau values are given in table for a one-tail test. They can be directly compared to the calculated value of tau after making the required corrections for the two-tail test if required. Whenever the sample size is more than 30, the tau values calculated need to be changed to Z value. This is because the distribution of tau approximates the normal distribution in large samples. This Z value can then be compared with the probability given in the standard Z table. If the Z calculated is greater than Z critical, then reject the null hypothesis in favor of the alternative hypothesis. And the formula for conversion of tau to Z is given in equation 5. This is Z is equal to 3 tau multiplied with square root of n into n minus 1 divided by square root of 2 into 2n plus 5 using Kendalls tau in partial correlation. Just the way ordinal data can be used for studying association between variables, it can also be used for partialing the effect of other variables to understand relationships. The non-parametric correlation method of Kendalls tau can be used for statistically controlling the variance contributed by one or more than one variables in order to study the relationship between two variables of a study in isolation. The data should be in at least ordinal scale, and like other non-parametric tests, here also the assumptions about the shape of the population are not required. One advantage that Kendalls tau enjoys over Spearmans rho is that it can be used for calculations of partial correlation. The equation for partial correlation using tau is the same as the one used for Pearson's correlation. The reader may refer to module 24 for complete discussion of partial correlation. However, we can give equation for partial correlation using tau for 3 variables here in equation 6. The equation is tau 1 to 0.3, that is the value of tau when we are studying the partial correlation between 1 and 2, partialing out the third variable is tau 1,2 minus tau 1,3 into tau 2,3 whole divided by square root of 1 minus tau 1,3 square into 1 minus tau 2,3 square. So, the researcher may calculate the values of tau using the relevant formula as explained in the above sections. The care must be taken for tied and untied ranks and corrections made accordingly. Using equation 5, the partial correlation coefficient can be calculated. The significance of partial correlation of tau can be found by using the relevant table value from the statistical table. For larger the samples, the tau value should be converted to Z using the equation 5 given above, and then using the standard Z table for probabilities and compare. However, one must be cautious in just blindly applying the partial correlation to the ordinal data, as the number of variables involved in the study increases. The partial correlation may turn out to be spurious if not applied carefully. The researcher must have some notions about the possible relationships among the variables, apply the a priori information judiciously in interpreting the findings. Some other methods of correlation. Tetrachoric R. In the preceding sections, the reader has learnt about two popular and reliable measures of association for the non-parametric data. The data was assumed to be in at least ordinal scale of measurement, but many a times the researcher wishes to study the relationship between the nominal data when two variables are dichotomous and can be presented in a 2 into 2 table. Tetrachoric correlation may be calculated in such situations. The variables are actually continuous in nature but measured as nominal set and dichotomous. These continuous variables, if measured exactly, would lead to a normal distribution. An example can be understanding the relationship between gender and smoking. When smoking is measured in two categories, smokers and non-smokers, and gender as male and female, the researcher asked a sample of total of 88 subjects with equal number of males and females for their smoking status. The frequency under each category was obtained, and so the data can be in the form of a four-fold table. The cells have been marked as A, B, C and D. The data can be like as shown in table 5 for male, female, smokers and non-smokers for cells A, B, C, D, and the totals are also showed for the rows and columns. The tetrachoric R, symbolized as R subscripted T, is equal to the cosine of 180 degree into BC divided by square root of AD plus square root of BC. Now, if we know the totals and we know the values as shown in table 5, we can substitute these values in this equation and we arrive at the cosine of 81.65, the value of which can be taken from the trigonometric ratios table, and it turns out to be 0.145. The phi coefficient. The phi coefficient is calculated as non-parametric measure of association when the data is genuinely dichotomous in nature. As the variables are not exactly continuous, so they cannot fall into normal distribution, and this sets phi coefficient different from tetrachoric coefficient. Although the phi coefficient can also be used for the continuous variables that are grouped into two discrete categories and may be split into two exclusive categories at the median. The phi coefficient is very useful in item analysis, and the calculation of item to item correlation is to be calculated. The tetrachoric correlation and phi correlation share the same relationship among themselves as biserial and point biserial correlation coefficients have among themselves. The variables are truly discrete in nature with no underlying continuity. The variable can be measured in only mutually exclusive categories. Let us understand the calculation of phi coefficient using the data given in table 5. The equation for calculation of phi is given as phi equal to AD minus BC divided by square root of A plus B into C plus D into B plus D into A plus C. Remember, these are the cells that have been marked. So, upon substituting the values of the cells here, the frequencies, we arrive at the phi coefficient of 0.091. One may observe that the phi coefficient and the tetrachoric correlation calculated for the same data are different. This is as the two correlations are not expressed in the same scale. Usually, the difference between the two values ranges from 0.15 to 0.30. The phi coefficient usually being the smaller one. The tetrachoric correlation is 0.145 and the phi coefficient is 0.91 for the same set of data. The differences between the two values is greater when the split in either of the variable is being associated departs from 50-50. The same holds true for biserial and point biserial correlations also, the biserial one being consistently lower than the point biserial correlation. The two correlation coefficients do have their share of similarities too, and therefore may pose confusion in their applications. The comparison on their averages, on their advantages and disadvantages may help the readers in clearing their doubts and facilitate their suitable application. Over the past few modules, we have learnt about the various methods to understand the relationship among the variables measured in different scales. Summary: there are non-parametric methods of correlation that are suitable for data that may not be apt for data otherwise. Some of the most popularly used non-parametric correlation methods are Spearmans rho, Kendalls tau, phi coefficient, etc. The basic logic behind rank order correlation developed by Charles Spearman is that the variables being measured are in at least ordinal scale. The data has to be thus ranked in two different series. If the variables are in at least ordinal scale and rank can be assigned to the scores on the variables being measured, then Kendalls tau is an apt estimate of association. Kendalls tau is ideally preferred when the sample size is small and there are many tied ranks. One major advantage of Kendalls tau that it enjoys over Spearman's rho is that Kendalls tau can be used for calculation of partial correlation. When two variables are dichotomous and can be presented in a 2x2 table, tetrachoric correlation may be calculated. The phi coefficient is calculated as non-parametric measure of association when the data is genuinely dichotomous in nature.